Welcome into a special edition of Clips and Dip. I'm Adam Oslin. We got Charles Mockler. Will Updike is here, and your iconic voice for your Los Angeles Clippers. He's got pipes in his throat, more golden than the Larry OB. It is Brien Sieman joining us. Brien, what's good? How's your offseason been?
It's been good. It's good to see everybody here. I've tried to keep up from afar with Clips and Dips, so I appreciate what you guys do here during the off season, and I'm happy to be joining you. I think this is my first time on here, if I'm not mistaken.
We waited an entire
Adam's
year
never
to
asked
get
me.
you
I
on.
kept asking him, like, can I come on? And he's just like, we got some other people. Coming on next week. We got, yeah.
So, Brien, in catching up on lost time, since we haven't had you on yet all throughout last season, let's get into what occurred last season and do a little bit of a Dana Scully-like autopsy on the Clippers 22-23 year. Well, I know you're a big X-Files fan. Come on now. But let's talk about just what occurred, because there's a lot of disappointment in the fan base. We've talked about it ad nauseum throughout this offseason, but it would be great to get your perspective and just a summary of how last season went. Given the disappointment once again.
I mean, I went into the season thinking that this was going to be a team that could possibly win 60 games, even with the big boys taking nights off, the roster top to bottom. I loved it. I thought they were going to be ready to go. I thought that the injury year gave guys like Terrence Mann a little bit of more ownership coming into this year. And just, I was so hyped up. And I was telling people privately, I'd be like, oh, this is it. If we don't win it all, something terrible has happened. I'll tell you that right now. It's what I kept saying. And my wife's side of the family, they're not into sports all that much, but I kept telling them, like, well, we're going to win it all. There's no question about it. And so I think at one point in time, we're barely 500. Like, how's it looking? I'm like, yeah, it's it is. It's going there. We'll see how it all goes. But I was disappointed too. And I've mentioned this before. I just thought the competitive integrity was not there every night, and it needs to be there. I love the regular season. I'm a believer that it creates habits. I'm a believer that it creates a mentality. And when you look at teams that have won it all, those starts, I mean, I bet you could go back and look at the last 10 to 15 champions, and their starts are like 15-2, 20-3. I mean, the Warriors did it a couple of years ago. Denver had a good start. The Bucks a few years ago were terrific. It's important, and it's important that you take that mentality for 82 games. We know Kawhi and PG are going to miss time, but everybody, I just kind of felt like eased their way into the season, and I just had a hard time feeling like this team was going to ever get over the hump. And if you compare last year's team to the one 2 years ago that maxed out their talent, the competitive integrity was never questioned. And when they lost by 20, you're like, yeah, man, these guys are laying it on the line every night. Like Reggie Jackson should have been in traction for much of the season 2 years ago, yeah. Right? And this dude, I remember there was a game in Portland where he winds up on his back. I thought he had a broken back. And he comes out and he plays the second half. And then I remember thinking, okay, well, tomorrow when he wakes up, I think we were in Utah, and he's gonna be hurting. And I see him, and he's like, I'm playing tonight, buddy. And it was just like nothing to him. And that's the spirit that I love and I want to see more of. And I'm hoping that last year was humbling. Now, that said, we get to the playoffs. You give me a healthy PG, we're beating Phoenix in 5. No one's telling me any different than that. And I respect what the Suns did.
Preaching to the choir. Let's go.
So, I mean, like, I don't want to say like it was a disastrous season and they didn't know what they were doing, but they have a healthy team, a healthy Kawhi and PG. They're winning that series, and who knows what's going on after that as they start to gain some confidence with Russ in that starting role. But it was a disappointing season with all the expectations that they had, and I'm hoping that fuels them in this offseason, and it fuels them when training camp opens on October 3rd.
What's that like for you? Like, you're close to the team, you're a broadcaster, you're there night in, night out. Like there are certain expectations that aren't really being met. Is your goal to just like try to keep bringing the energy for the fans and hope that things turn around? Or what's it like when you're sitting in the chair there?
It's a good question. I definitely feel the frustration because I love the team too. And I'm rooting for the team. I'm rooting for a good game. And there's a third team that I'm rooting for, and that's the fans. I want them to have a great night. I want them to have something to cheer for. They have been starved for success. We've had so much hype around the team over the last decade, and they just haven't been able to get over the hump. So when I start seeing that, I'm like, I feel down. I get upset. But at the end of the day, I still love what I do, and that's the only place I want to be is in front of a table with a microphone and watching a basketball game. So it's not all doom and gloom, even though it isn't going the way that I want it to go. And it's funny because in my normal life, I'm probably not the most optimistic person, but I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to the Clippers. I'm like, This is the game. Okay, that one play is the game. It's going to turn the whole thing around. We're going 10-0 the next 2 weeks. Well, that never happened last year, but that's how I was like that when in the Chris Kaman years. Like when we had Barrett Davis, I'm like, oh, here we go. We might have lost 7 in a row, but we just beat the worst team in the league, and now it's going to be giving us confidence. I stay there all the time, and so I don't know if that's just a genetic deficiency that I have or just an eternal love for the Clippers. Probably column A, column B there.
Well, it's funny because your spot, for those of you who don't know, Brian, when he's broadcasting, is right in that kind of like the perfect seating, basically halfway up that first bowl. It's wonderful. If you sit in that section sometimes in media, you're joined by Lawrence Frank, who is a very enthusiastic watcher of the game. So that's got to be, I don't know. For me, it would be hard if he was if your boss's 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 boss was right in front of you during that, but he's so focused, it seems like it's not that big of a deal.
But he's a great guy.
That helps.
And I think I feel that he understands the job that I have to do, and he knows that if I have a question about, hey, how are we going to handle this? He gives me an honest answer. Like those guys are great, all of them. I love the organization. I get that we haven't achieved what we're trying to achieve, but there were so many mountains that this organization had to climb and conquer. And part of that is winning a title. But in order to win a title, they had to make this a place, a destination. They had to get not only players, but front office staff. Business side is great. Like the whole organization is run so well. It's a matter of time before it all comes together and we get to where we're going. But guys like Lawrence, we had Michael Winger, Mark Hughes, Trent Redden, Lee Jenkins sits in those seats every once in a while. I mean, I just look over at Lee and I'm like, I can't believe that guy's in our organization. It's so awesome that the brain power that we have and the wisdom that we have. So I actually love that Lawrence sits there. Sometimes I'll go down there and ask him a question, and I can tell within 2 words he's pissed or he's willing to talk.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's good to see you. Hope everything's good. I just walk away and act like I had a phone call or something. I get out of the way.
I was once sitting in his seat in Media Row, which was very embarrassing. I felt a tap on my shoulder because there was no name tag. And I was kind of like, and I was like, oh, it's Lawrence Frank. I will move, sir. That is my bad.
So you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but talking about Paul George not being able to go in that first round series, unfortunately, against the Phoenix Suns. But let's play things forward as we go back to what he said on Monday on his podcast. He said he's going to be on his bully S this season. Normally, I'd say shit like I just did now, but we got Brien Sieman on, so I'm going to try to be more buttoned up here in my undershirt. So Paul George said online that he is going to be on his bully S this season. How does that manifest itself? Because to his credit, after what happened in the bubble in 2020, he came into the 2021 season, said he's going to be on guys all year long, and he was very good and helped lead them to the Western Conference Finals. So what are we hoping to see from Paul George?
Well, I feel they have to know that this is going to be a possible last hurrah. Like they have to know that, hey, if this doesn't happen, we're going to start getting kind of shopped around. That's just my opinion. I think he has to know that as well. So I would say it's going to go well in that regard. But in my opinion, why would you ever get off of it? Like that, when I heard that, why would you not just be this guy all the time? And I feel that, PG is so talented and has everything you could ever want. If he had Russell Westbrook's determination, we'd be talking about a top 5 player of all time. And to me, if you have this, whatever you want to call this mentality coming into this season, great. I mean, I thought he was just okay last year and he was an all-star. Like, I thought he was good. Like, I didn't think he was the dominant player that he had kind of talked about, but yet he still was an all-star. So I'm excited to see it. And I really hope that they feel some urgency, like, hey, man, the window is closing. Like, it isn't staying open forever. And he had mentioned that last year. So let's hope that he lays it all out on the floor this year because they need it. And if he does, you're looking at an all-NBA selection at the very least. That's how talented he is.
Are we worried that he's going to just become a literal bully and maybe start pantsing people or shoving people in lockers? And how would the team
Atomic wedgies.
respond to that? You know,
I'm just trying to see how that would go over with Russ. Like
I mean, it'd be Zoo. Zoo is the one getting bullied.
Play along and be like, "Hey, what are you doing? I mean, stop it." You know, I'm trying to think of who else he
That
could do that
secret
to.
tunnel would be occupied often.
People getting away from PG, like, dude, he's just he put saran wrap on the damn toilet seat again, like just ruining everything. Brian, have you ordered your James Harden jersey yet, or are you gonna wait for that whole trade to go through?
Yeah, I don't know what number he's going to wear, so I'm waiting for that. No, we're all waiting to see if it even happens. And I watched your show last week, and I mean, I don't know. I just don't know how Philadelphia has an ounce of leverage, like anything, on so many levels. The player is on an expiring deal in his mid-30s and can still contribute at a high level, but not the level that we are used to seeing. He's called his shot about the team he wants to go play for.
Yeah.
But the thing to me that's the biggest driver for this, if you're Philadelphia, is, dude, you've got Joel Embiid in the middle of his prime. You cannot waste a game playing cat and mouse with a team that knows that you're up against it. The Sixers are going to have to figure something out immediately, and it's I don't see a world in which they're going to get that Godfather offer. I don't see how that's going to happen. But listen, I don't like to speculate about this stuff, especially because I'm a team employee. But all I know is what you guys read, what I read. I actually never ask the front office about what's going on, but you could just see what the cards are. I mean, it's like you're playing poker and you know the other guy's hand. Okay, I know you don't have two aces, so I'm not going to be afraid of this pot. I'm going to do what I need to do to get what I need. Daryl Morey's a smart guy. Maybe he brings in a third or fourth team to help kind of create some riches in that deal for Philadelphia. But to me, the time is ticking for them. They cannot waste Joel Embiid. He's already kind of hinted he's willing to go somewhere else. You know, I mean, you got to be careful. You've got a generational talent like Joel Embiid. You can't let it go.
So not to speculate too much, but what would a player like James Harden bring to this Clippers team? How do you think he would fit?
I think he'd fit pretty well.
Player of his skill set.
I think he would fit well, given that he would be the third, maybe fourth guy. You know, it depends on where you rank Russ and how many touches he's going to get. Is Norman Powell on the floor at the same time? Because then that's that. I mean, I think James could fit in well. It seems like he's, as Doc Rivers would say, he's over himself. I think he's ready just to come in and play a role. If he's a 15-8 guy, that's success to me.
Hey, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And a guy that can kind of, you would have two interesting players in Harden possibly. And again, this is speculative, but you have a guy that could really organize the offense and create shots for himself and his teammates. But then you have the other guy in Russ, who's the leadership quality that this team, I feel, has been missing really since the start of this 2-1-3 campaign in 2019. And I think Russ being there for a training camp, and I talked with Adam, I was concerned is a good word when Russ was brought on for so many reasons. And I want to be clear, like the guy showed out, and taking the contract that he did with the Clippers shows you that he just wants to be loved. And he just wants to play in a place where he thinks he can find success in the role that he's given. So if you were like me and you kind of like kept Russ out here, give him a hug. No, I think his leadership through a training camp and his mentality through a preseason will be infectious. And I think that's that missing piece. I think Pat Beverly did a great job, but Russ can do so much more on the floor. And I think it's going to be great. Now, I want to be very clear. Pat Beverly might be my favorite all-time Clipper, so that's no shade. And
okay.
I love Pat. Also, he was always good to me, but just what he did in that 2018-19 year was so much fun. Anyway,
Hard
I digress.
over height. Hard over height.
That's right. I heard that one before. So I think Harden's could be a good addition. I've always been a fan of his skill set, so it'll be curious to see. And you got a guy in Ty Lue that I think, and we'll talk about this later about attacking the regular season and having more urgency. But I think Ty Lue is going to be able to put him in a spot to be very successful and very tricky to deal with, especially when Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are on the floor at the same time.
Yeah, you bring up Ty Lue. We recently got some word that it seems like Kawhi should be ready for training camp. If that's the case, like, how do you think this team, do we see a difference in approach to that first, 20 or 30 games if we have a healthy Kawhi in training camp? And do you think that could have any sort of impact on on these sort of contract negotiations that are not necessarily under the clock? They're both under contract for another season, but from what we've heard, at least, there hasn't been a whole lot of movement there.
Yeah, I don't know anything about. I don't even know how I feel about a contract extension, to be honest. Like, I mean, I know the work that Lawrence and that front office have done that predates Kawhi's arrival, and I'll just be honest. For me, I have eternal trust in what they're doing. So if they say we're going to sign these guys to 3 or 4 year deals, then that's the right move. I believe that. I believe in them. Others can say they don't. That's fine, but I do. So I don't know really where I sit. It was kind of like what Chris Paul was like in 2017. I didn't know if I wanted him to come back, if I wanted him to go, and it's not because I didn't think he would help the Clippers win, but at a price tag at that age when we've been missing games, I was like, I'm good either way. I know if he stays, we'll have a chance to win games. If he goes, we'll have a chance to actually rebuild, hit the reset button, which we did beautifully. Like, you couldn't have asked for it any better.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how the beginning of the season goes. I just want to feel like they are crazed and desperate to win. We know Kawhi's going to miss 20 games, probably more. PG's going to miss 15 to 20, probably. But there's still enough talent on this team to win a lot of games. And I want the desperate urgency. I want them to feel like this is indeed the last dance for these guys if they can't get it done. I'm not saying that it is, but I need that urgency every single night because it just wasn't there. There were so many games I walked away shaking my head like, what? I mean, the Denver game in I want to say it was early January where the players got benched. There was a game in Cleveland. I mean, it was just rough. There were so many times I just felt like they weren't out there trying to win and trying to play as hard as they could. That has to be that happens to every team, including the Denver Nuggets, who won it all. I just felt it happened. I felt like it happened like 2 or 3 times a month, and that was too many times.
Yeah, I like what you said about kind of playing like crazed. Like, we need like an incredibly determined version of those guys. There was a cool story to kind of talk about some of the younger guys and like focus and bringing the energy. I don't know if you saw it. Law Murray tweeted out a really cool anecdote from the Drew League when Moussa Diabate was playing in it, where a coach posted that he was like, I had an NBA guy on my Drew League team who I had to sub out because he wasn't, he was making some defensive lapses. And he said when he was talking with Moussa was just locked in on his eyes. He was saying, yes, coach, yes, coach. He internalized it. He went to the bench. He was still cheering and bringing guys up. That same coach had college guys on the team who he did the same thing with, who were not as enthused and didn't reciprocate those same feelings Moussa did. How can some of these young guys maybe help with the energy? And I mean, Kobe Brown's been talked up, a fair amount by this team so far. Like, what are you looking forward to from some of the young guys and what they can bring? Because playing time, it might not be as much as some people want, but given these Clippers goals, having that energy around should help too.
Yeah, and Moussa could be a guy that gets in there a few more times than he did last year. Remember, he won that Portland game in Portland early in the season, came in, played the whole fourth quarter. And it's funny, if you go back and watch, and I only know this because Ty was talking about it on the plane. He says, go watch the tape. I'm out there telling Moussa literally every board that he needs to be on. Be 2 feet outside. He had to direct him literally like an orchestra conductor because Moussa wasn't totally aware. And that's not because he's not a smart guy, because he hasn't been playing with some of these guys. But he's kind of all over the place defensively. But his energy was so infectious, and he deserved the game ball and then some. He was awesome. But the guy that I feel like needs to really make a show is Brandon Boston. I'm curious about him. This is his 3rd year. I've talked with Lawrence in the past about developing younger players, and he's always said, I need to see something by the 3rd year. There's not a skill set piece that Brandon Boston doesn't have offensively. I've seen him in practice. He's got all the tools. Can he put it together in a game? Can he play a team game? Let's find that out. But there's a lot of talent on the back end of that bench. I'm curious about Jason Preston. I thought he was okay. I thought he had some good moments in Summer League. And Kobe Brown. I mean, there was a couple games there. You're just like, well, what's the deal with this dude? Can this guy actually crack the rotation? That's how good he looked in Summer League. But then you look at the depth chart ahead of him, and it's going to be an uphill battle. But they've got some young talent going forward. I agree. I don't know if they're going to see put it this way. If they do start seeing a lot of time, something probably happened to get that time that's not great. You know what I mean? Unless there's some crazy surprise in training camp that some of these guys get into the rotation.
Yeah, we'll see a video of Kobe Brown dunking on Kawhi in practice. And they'll be like, well, I guess he has to start now. Coming up, we have some fantastic Clippers fans questions that we did have to curate because shockingly, Clippers Twitter isn't as positive as real life Clippers fans. But before that, we have some ads coming up. We got to keep the lights on. They've been a little loud. So if that's been your case, go ahead and turn them down a skosh. But after that, we are asking Brien Sieman your fan submitted questions. Ads coming up in 3, 2, 1. All right, we are back. I believe this is season 2, episode 7 of Clips and Dip. We're joined by Brien Sieman. Brien, thank you so much for being on here.
Lucky number 7 with Brien now.
There we go. Will, what is this question we got from Clippers Twitter power user Justin W. at LA Clippers Film, who, Brien, I believe you have met before.
I have met. He is a basketball savant.
Yes.
I really respect his opinion.
Absolutely. Justin asked, members of the franchise, we've heard about it from Ty Lue, Lawrence Frank. We've talked about respecting the regular season again. Given the health concerns, with some of these guys, to what end, can we really achieve that? Can they achieve that goal?
Well, if the goal is to win 60 games, that's going to be tough to do. To me, it's a mentality. It's a crazed urgency. It doesn't matter if Kawhi and PG are having those load management moments. I get it. It's going to happen. It's unavoidable with these guys. But you still need to have this mentality that is just go for broke every single night for who is available to play. And it just was so hit or miss. I just didn't know what was our identity last year. I did not know.
Totally.
And so that can't be the case now. They have got to be able to come out and just give you everything they have. It's impossible to quantify, and I can see that my video is frozen. I don't look like I've been hanging out with Cheech and Chong the whole time. But, I lost my train of thought there. But
went up in smoke.
It did. But I need to see a mentality every single night. That's what I was going to say. It's like, I don't know how you can quantify it, but I'm telling you from my front row seat, 75% of the time, the team that plays harder wins. I just believe that no matter who they're up against, I believe that is the case. And I just want to see them play hard every single night.
That's a good call. We talked a little bit about Russ. Jesse Season, who I believe is Jesse Beer, kind of asked, what was your perspective of seeing Russ welcome to the team? How have you seen kind of the team change? And I shared your thing when we brought Russ on. Trepidation, I would say, from my perspective, to put it politely, given what we've seen so far. But he does bring something that evidently Paul George and Kawhi need to kind of lift them up. You mentioned the training camp thing. Having a full training camp is going to be good, but could the Russ experiment really have gone, I guess, any better than it did than that last season?
I mean, outside of the first 5 games, I don't think so, because I think he brought exactly what the Clippers needed. He is the physical embodiment of what I'm talking about for the Clippers. Russell Westbrook has never taken a playoff in his life. He has never had a game where he's just kind of gone through the motions. Yes, he's had games where he hasn't been efficient. I can promise you it wasn't because he didn't prepare mentally or physically. It just wasn't there that night. Mm-hmm. And even though I had my reservations about Russ when he came here, I always respected the way that he played. In fact, if you want to go back to the 2014 playoffs, Kevin Durant is the MVP. And I remember talking with Doc Rivers before the playoff series had began. And I said, how do you slow down Durant? What's your biggest key? He's like, Durant is tough and we got to pay attention to him. But the head of the snake is Russell Westbrook. You take him out, you can start derailing everybody else. And I think that's probably his impact has probably changed than it did, maybe say 9 years ago. But this is a guy that I love to see play as hard as he does, and I don't think he's going to let anybody else off the hook. And I think it's easier for him to look. Leaders are leaders; they're going to lead, and I don't think he felt uncomfortable when he came in there. But it's a different vibe when he's coming in to a whole new blank canvas to be able to say, this is how we're playing. This is what I expect from you. And everybody that's played with him, again, whether you're a fan and you like Russ or don't like Russ, I have yet to see a teammate say, I didn't like playing with Russell Westbrook. In fact, it's the best teammate I've ever had. That is almost unanimous throughout his time in the NBA. So I sense that he's going to have a much bigger imprint leadership-wise because it's going to be more comfortable for him. So I thought he was received very well by the players. Ty Lue loved him. I mentioned this story a couple of times at the end of the year, but I'll say it again here. I remember it was maybe the last game of the season. We're playing the Blazers, and somebody asked Chauncey Billups about Russell Westbrook, and he says, you know what? I don't know if it was a great fit a couple months ago, but the Clippers needed a point guard and a leader, and Russ needed somebody to give him a hug. And that's what he did, and the results speak for themselves. And like I said, I was really concerned about it, and I am not concerned. I thought I ate my words. In fact, Adam and I, Noah Eagle was the adult in the room with Adam and I when we were commiserating about.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
About Russ, and Noah's like, well, listen, man, whether you like him or don't like him, you need to understand that he's going to be on this team, and you need to do it. You need to, he's going to be here, and to do your job well, you need to let it go. And I go, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. And then it was like that moment. I think that was maybe like before the Memphis game where he scored like 41 points or whatever it was. It was a crazy outing. And I kept looking back at Noah, shaking my head like, you're supposed to be 24 years old. How are you the adult in the room? My God. But anyway, he put Adam and I in our place pretty quickly.
Wise beyond his years, Noah Eagle. We got your voice of the Clippers, Brien Sieman on C&D, taking your questions right now. Clip Check Nick asks this, Brian. What was your favorite moment or moments or game in your time on a Clippers broadcast so far?
Oh, geez. I truly do love them all. Any of the comebacks are fun. Like the 20-point comebacks are always a blast. And it's not because you're going to win when you're down 19. I mean, like there's so much hope, I guess. And hope is always, I think, the driving emotion in sports. Like you just are so hopeful, whether it's the 2018-19 season for the Clippers and you're hoping that they can get a run into the playoffs, you're hoping that they can get a big free agent. And the hope is so much fun. And in a microcosm, let's say you're down 35 in Washington, you cut it to 25, you cut it to 15. Now you're hoping that they can pull it out. And then once that hope is like now a fact that it happened, there's so much joy after the fact. It's such a buzz after the game is over, in the bus, with the players, especially when you do it on the road. And I feel like we've done a lot of them on the road. So, sometimes we go back to the hotel and the Clippers will rent out the bar and you'll sit there with the players and the coaches and it's like a little mini celebration. They're not celebrating a title, but it was a job well done that night. So those are my favorite moments, but I'll be honest, I've got just the best job in the league. I sincerely believe that. I just love every day that I go to work, and I love the days where we're not working and I'm prepping. I love days like today when I just get to talk hoops in the middle of the off season. I have either made a deal with the devil or I was born under a lucky star. It's one of the two things, and I'm afraid to find out when it's all said and done.
I got lucky getting to work with Brian, and I'm partial to his 31-point comeback call against the Golden State Warriors on the radio back in 2019. That is an all-timer. I usually repost it at Follow Anime on the anniversary every year because I just love it. Plus, the Last of the Mohicans music, I put underneath it if it wasn't epic enough. Will?
So Andrew in the 818 wants to know, of all the players on the team currently, who do you think would make a good color commentator?
Wow. I don't know him well enough, but he's got the gift of gab, and that is Bones Highland.
Oh my! Oh,
so
man.
Bones can really chat, and it's in all the good ways. He's got a real gift of gab. I'll tell you a funny story though. Who would you say would be the most challenging in your estimation? Who would be the toughest?
Everyone would say Kawhi.
So here's the story. So to be clear, I don't bother Kawhi. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work to get not a lot of answers, and I don't want any bad vibes from him to me. And then if he didn't answer the question from me to him, so I just I get it. I get it with Kawhi. So We're in Utah, middle of the season 2 years ago. So he's out all year. And like I said, I kind of just keep my distance with Kawhi. Every once in a while, I'll give him a what up when he's on the bus, but that's it. So we're in the team dining area. It's just me and Kawhi is clear across the room. And I'm just minding my own business. And all of a sudden, I feel this tap on my shoulder, and he puts out his big, giant fist. You can't see me because I'm frozen here in time. And I'm like, oh, hey, what's up, guy? And I kind of pound his fist back, and I'm like, I look at the chef. I'm like, what was that? What happened there? And I'm looking around to see if I'm on some kind of camera show or whatever. So I get on the bus for a shoot around, and Fratello was with us, and he goes, and by the way, Mike Fratello was one of my favorite all-time human beings ever.
Oh, yeah.
I love him with all my heart for so many reasons. And he sits down and he goes, well, Mr. Seaman, I had a very interesting conversation with one Kawhi Leonard. And I'm like, you did? I said, I had a really long conversation with him too. He gave me a fist bump, and the czar didn't understand the dry humor there. That's fine. He goes, Kawhi was really interested in where we're sitting. And I'm like, oh, that's okay, great. Well, did you tell him because we're in Utah, we're very high up in Utah. He's like, I told them where we're sitting. And he said, that's good to know. So a couple of days later, I go up to one of our PR people, Dennis Rogers, and I said, Kawhi's asking a few times now where Fratello sits. And Dennis goes, oh, yeah, I think he wants to do a game with you guys. And I'm like, what? Huh?
What?
Yes. So initially, I'm like, how awesome. And then I start thinking, I'm like, does he know he has to talk? Like, does he know he's like, I can't say, hey, Kawhi, what are your thoughts on the team? Well, they're going to play 82 games, 41 at home and 41 on the road. Like, that's kind of my fear. And I think that people would tune in and be like, hey, I want to hear what Kawhi says. So now I'm starting to feel pressure. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to make him the butt of a joke. I'm not going to I want him to look good. So I'm really panicking about this. And so we're coming up with he wanted to do it on the road where we were courtside so that he could just slide over and then go right back to the bench without fans bothering him. And we're about 4 days out, and we're going to Denver. This would have been in 2022. And we're going to Denver, and they're like, yeah, I think this is going to be the game. So I'm stressing. I got to come up with 50 questions for a 5-minute interview. And I think we get on the plane, and I'm like, I don't get nervous, but I get anxious for games, but I'm nervous. And then I finally go up to Dennis, and I'm like, hey, man, is tomorrow the night? He's like, oh, yeah, Kawhi decided he's not going to do it. He's not coming to the game. So I was like building this whole thing up. I'm like, oh, my God. And I was partially relieved, although I think it would have been fun. And I've talked to the players to a man. I'm like, is he really funny? They all say hilarious. He's the funniest dude in that locker room. I think you probably heard the Ty Lue story about air balls this week. I mean, I'm going to airball again. He's like, I'm not running. I'm not doing that garbage. But so anyway, that would have been a test for sure. But it would have been a good one, I think.
That's awesome, man. Hopefully something like that could happen. That would be a trip. I also love Mike Fratello too. Mike Fratello is the only commentator who draws up jump ball plays, which I love. I'm being sincere. I love that's the stuff you don't usually see. Ethan Chan wants to know. So we kind of talked about the good moments, right? Like when you're, doing a comeback. How do you keep your composure when things? And this is Ethan Chan's words. How do you keep composure during the calls in the clutch when things go horribly wrong for the team?
I still believe that they can get it done, unless it's obviously the last possession of a game or, whatever. I'm only focusing on, I think they can get this done. I'll be honest, like the first couple of times I was with the Timberwolves back in 06, 07. So it's the last year Garnett is with the Wolves before he goes to Boston. And there were 3 games, and they were my first 3 NBA games that all came down to the final possession. And I literally felt like I was having a stroke. Like my right hand was tingly, and I'm like, what am I going to say? Oh my gosh, and I had some people that I worked with that weren't necessarily great human beings, so they were always nitpick what you do. So I had that nervousness going on.
Like us with
now, yeah. Adam was, well, thank you for bringing that up. So thank you.
That's another segment.
Yeah. But now, when we get in those clutch moments, like I feel alive. Like I just love being there. I don't always nail it. for sure. That's going to be the case. But I feel great. So when they are not playing well, I'm still a believer. All right, it's only a 1-possession game. Or hey, we came back from 35 points, guys, in a half. This is nothing. We can figure this out. So I'm just happy to be. Honestly, it just comes back to the joy of the job and the luckiness that I know I have. So I'm not going to get so pissed off that you sons of bitches, gosh, make a regular pass for crying out loud. I'm never going to be that way. But sometimes I'll just look over at my partner and I'll be like, man, that was not a good play. That was just not a good shot. But like I said, I'm so thrilled to be there. I don't ever get too mad.
Tony Lou wants to know how you work through having different floating commentators and color analysts next to you, and just how do you adjust? Mike Fratello is very different than Jim Jackson. You work with Don McClain at times. Like, it's been a revolving door, but you make it seem like it's all family either way.
Well, it is. And so I mentioned Mike Fratello. Let's throw Don McClain, Corey Maggette, Jim Jackson, Chauncey Billups. So let's go back to 1990, the NBA on NBC. It's the first year. Now it's Marv, and it's a guy named Mike Fratello, who I knew from the Atlanta Hawks. I grew up in the Midwest, so they had TBS, which was the Hawks Superstation. Yeah, and so they syndicated that throughout the entire country. So I was very aware of who Mike Fratello was. I did not know he had such a great, dry personality. So I'm in my early teens, and I'm watching Mike Fratello. And I'm actually, by the way, I was dating my wife at the time. So my wife and I have been together forever. So we would be watching NBA on NBC, and Mike Fratello would be on, and I would just hang on every word because I'm trying to learn about the game. It's 1990. There's no internet. I don't know anything about anything else other than what I'm watching. And Fratello would diagram the plays. He'd tell you where you're supposed to be, why this was working. And I was enamored with it. So fast forward a couple of years, 1992, I'm in Iowa, Big Ten country. Who's the best player in the country? It's two people, Don McClain and Jim Jackson. And I'm watching these guys, and I'm telling you, I was such a basketball and am a basketball junkie, but I loved college as much as I loved the pros back in the 90s. That's when it was at its peak. So
Did you go to a good college basketball school? Or
I did. I don't know if you know this. I went to the Harvard of Lawrence. It's the University of Kansas. It's state education, but don't let it fool you. I was there for 5 years. I was so great. But I would watch Jim Jackson on Big Monday, and then I'd stay up late and I'd watch Don McClain and Tracy Murray and Gerald Matkins at UCLA. So all these people have been, and I mean, like, I'm hand on a Bible. I'm telling you, man, like, I watched these guys when I was a kid. And I remember the first time Don McClain was in the media room, and I'd been in with the team for maybe a year, and he shows up when he needs to show up. And I think he showed up early on this day. And Don has what they call a resting bitch face, where he doesn't look like he's a very warm person.
Sure.
I need to be very clear. He's an awesome dude. So he's got this like look on his face, and he comes up, he goes, "Are you Brien Sieman?" And I'm like, "Oh shit. Yeah. Yep." He goes, "I was listening to you on the radio. You do a good job. Keep it up." And then he just walks away. And I'm like, yes, that was a good interaction. That was awesome. So Don is just awesome. So watching him at UCLA, I actually was a UCLA fan growing up in Iowa and would go to their NCAA tournament games when we were on spring break because I loved watching Don and Tracy Murray was one of my favorite players, bombing from deep. So I'm going around the block to go next door. The answer is I love all these people that I get to work with. I watched Chauncey win finals MVP in 2004, and I just appreciated that grinding Detroit Pistons squad. So to be able to work with all these people and be on a text thread with some of these guys, it's crazy. To Mike Fratello, I've been at his house. He's been in my car. He talks to my boys. I mean, I leave the house and I'll tell my wife, I'm like, "Oh, by the way, I'm only going to work with Mike Fratello." I've worked with the Czar for 200 games, and it's still a pinch me moment. So if it sounds like it's family, because in my heart, they really all are. I love them all. And there's different personalities, and I like that. I really do. And I like to have fun with Jim. I know the Czar doesn't understand anything that's not basketball, so there'll be no pop culture references with Mike Fratello. And I think that's great. I sincerely mean, I keep saying it, I just have the best job in the world, and I'm so blessed. And I just love all these people. Anybody they throw at me, I'm going to know where their background is, and I'm just going to have a good time with them. It's been a really fun ride here these last 4 years.
And there is a saying about Don McClain, and this comes from the Petros and Money show. The next ass he kisses will be the first.
Yes.
Will be the first. And we love Don. And getting his stamp of approval, that's the best feeling in the world.
It was pretty good, man. And plus, he knows the game as well as literally anyone that's walked the face of this earth. So if he gives you a blessing, you've earned it, and it's a good feeling.
Well, Brian, you've said the last 4 years on the broadcast have been a blessing for you. Clippers fans everywhere, we're so lucky to have you and everything you bring to the game. That you make the comebacks better, you make the losses better too, which I think is probably the best mark of a commentator. Are you going to be back for the preseason games? Are you going to be doing the game up in Seattle, or are you not getting paid for the offseason? Which
I believe we are doing. I got to change that picture. Hold on. I keep trying to make the camera work so I don't look like I'm.
No, you're looking good on our.
That's the worst one, and I'm going to keep it there. I think we are. I think we are doing games in Hawaii. That's where training camp is, which we've done a couple. We did that pre-COVID, and then we are doing a game in Seattle, and then after that, I don't know. Last year, we don't have the schedule yet. Like, we don't have any idea what it is either. Mm-hmm. But last year, KTLA did all of the preseason games, which it's basically a Bally's production that they put on the air for KTLA. So it's all kind of the same pieces from a production standpoint. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know. I want to say maybe October 9th is our first preseason game, but I don't know if that's been released yet. I'm just grasping at straws there, but I'm looking forward to it.
We're going to build that as breaking news from Brien Sieman. So thank you for that. Before we get out of here, can we let's just get a couple positivity thoughts for Clipper Nation right now. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. Things feel a little down in the offseason dumps a bit for some Clippers fans. Brian, what can you say to lift these people up?
No, I feel good. I mean, I'm glad to hear Paul George is angry, if that's the word you want to use, if he's going to be back on his BS, as he said. I think Kawhi will be just fine coming into training camp. But, I mean, I really believe it. Like, to me, you know what, if you ask me, the biggest missing ingredient to me has been a rock-solid, truth-telling leader in the locker room. I'm not sure they've had that with Kawhi and PG. That's not their role. That's not who they are. You know what I mean? And you can't do that and have it be sincere if that's not who you are. Now, to have a guy like Russell Westbrook in the locker room from day one, not allowing slippage. You know, I remember Scotty Brooks, when he was in Oklahoma City, said, we never had a bad practice. And he touted it because of Russ and his just no-nonsense attitude. And I think everybody bought in. KD obviously did too, and they had a great team there. But I think Russ is that backbone of leadership. And if you had told me in February that I'd be singing Russ's praises as the biggest reason why I think the Clippers are going to have a different year this year, I'd have called you crazy. But I think leadership has been the missing ingredient, and I think they found it. And who knows what happens with the James Harden situation. It's all speculative, but I think this team has enough talent to really make some noise in the Western Conference. If they play with a competitive edge, I think that they're going to be just fine. And I look forward to kind of a clash of the Titans between Denver. Obviously, what Phoenix did is fantastic. Dallas really picked it up later in this offseason. I thought they would miss the playoffs for sure. Now they're in the top 4 spot. It's going to be interesting to see. Lakers maintained and maybe got a little bit better as well. The West is tough. This just in, but I feel great about where the Clippers are. I really do. I'm excited to see where they go with this.
Will, you want to take us out?
Yeah, Will, send us out. I'm hyped up. I want game 1 tomorrow now after this interview.
We've managed to get through the audio issues.
Will, you're
but
muted.
There's still one left. Will's
muted. He's too conscious of his background noise.
I got one lingering question, Brian.
Yeah.
I heard you on a broadcast one time say that you don't like soup. Is that true? You don't like any soup.
And Chauncey had never had
fill in
soup.
the
Chauncey's
blanks.
only seen 6 movies.
Things Brian doesn't like to eat.
Boy, I tell you.
Another hour?
Whole podcast about what I will not eat, and soup is on that. It's
no
just gross.
soup.
No, is chili soup? Chili's not a soup.
Chili's is it's a
No.
stew. It's a
Let's
stew.
just say his favorite episode of Seinfeld. I think you know it.
Yeah. I eat chili. I'm telling you, my diet is brutal. It's awful in terms of what I won't eat and how limiting it is. But I've never had chicken noodle soup, vegetable soup, nothing. It's weird to me to eat liquid with a spoon is just bizarre to me. I just don't understand it, man.
So, soup with a straw, yay or nay?
Maybe. I'll put that one in there. I'll put that one in there for a minute.
Milkshake for the middle ground.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
chicken
love
noodle
Brian's-
milkshake.
We love Brien Sieman, and despite the audio issues, this is without a doubt my favorite episode of C&D so far. We want to thank everyone for listening. You can follow us on YouTube at Clippers Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Clippers Pod. Will, you typically take us out with the right mantra.
Yeah.
And
Listen wherever you get your podcasts, and you can review us over on iTunes or Spotify. I'm completely off my rhythm. I can't have a rotating cast ever. But thank you so much for listening, and I'll kick it to you, Chuck, to send us out.
And as always, we'll be back next week, and let's go Clips.